This evening, Dana White announced the main event of UFC Shanghai. That's going to be Zhang versus Johnny Walker. Now, he also introduced, or I should say, announced the co-main event, which is kind of a pretty solid co-main event. It could be a main event of a fight night itself. That's going to be Aljamain Sterling versus Brian Ortega. By now, you've probably already heard the news. I'm just going to run through a couple of the other fights that have been announced by various media outlets, a couple by the UFC as well. Sergey Pavlovich versus Waldo Cortez Acosta. That honestly is, since the announcement that John Jones is retiring, a pretty big fight in the heavyweight division. Now that it feels like things are refreshed, things can move again. That's an interesting one. You've got Michel Pereira versus Marco Tulio. You've got Sumu Darji versus Kevin Borjas. You've got Dr. Nurgoje versus Uran Saltibaldiev. And you've got Loan R. Kavanaugh versus Charles Johnson. That should be a fun one at flyweight. And we used to have Shi Ming versus Bruno Brazil at this event, but that was announced that it's going to be moved over to the main event of Road to UFC, the semifinals. That's the day before, also at the Shanghai Indoor Stadium. So I'm going to react to a couple of these things just real briefly. The main event of Johnny Walker versus Zhang Mingyang. I really like this fight a lot. Is it a number one contender kind of fight? Top of the rankings sort of fight? It's not. It's a fight that is specifically made for the Chinese fans. And I think that this is a really good platform for Zhang Mingyang, and I really, really like this matchmaking a lot. I feel like the theme of this Shanghai event, which ironically, so far doesn't have a whole lot of Chinese fighters. There's around 5 more slots for fights to be announced. So still could be a lot of Chinese fighters, but definitely the UFC wasn't trying to just build this out with just Chinese talent versus everybody else. Really tried to get some international names on here, tried to get some fights with some relevance. So I do really appreciate that kind of respect for the Chinese fan base. But the fight itself, Zhang Mingyang versus Johnny Walker, I think that this is a really key fight for Zhang Mingyang. A couple things about this. This is the first Zhang Mingyang is the first fighter who is a Road to UFC alum to main event a UFC event. He's also the first fighter who's an alum of the Shanghai PI to fight in the main event of a UFC event. So pretty big. Those may just sound like stats to you, but they really are important stats for China. And the reason for that is that it's showing that the Shanghai PI is actually doing some really good work in bringing Chinese MMA along. And you might say, well, this fight may not have been made as a main event outside of China. And you're right, but you look at Zhang Mingyang, and this is a guy that the UFC wants to build up. They want to give him spotlight. They want to give him opportunities to grow and expand his fan base. They're looking at this guy who's a Chinese fighter. He's a big guy. He's in the heavier weight classes. He's got every single fight that he's won was a first round finish. So he's got the stats on his side. He's an exciting guy. He's not the kind of bigger fighter that's just going to clinch against the cage. He's not a plodding kind of guy. He's athletic. He's going to try to get that fight finished as soon as possible. So, the style the UFC likes. He's on. He's only 26 years old, so he's on the younger side of things. He's got really everything the UFC wants in order to build a star. Really, except for like a big personality that's going to create a lot of quotes. That's really the only thing that Zhang Mingyang doesn't really have right now. But that could come in time as he gets more spotlight. So curious to watch that. But the matchmaking really solid in this fight. I love how they are moving him up. Zhang Mingyang, he's currently number 14. Johnny Walker, I believe, is number 11. So Zhang is coming off of this fight against Anthony Smith, finishing Anthony Smith in the first round in Kansas City. And he got his spot in the rankings with that win. Now he's at number 14. This fight is perfect for him because it's not too much of a jump up. They're giving him just a nice little modest boost. They're giving him a fighter that is winless in his last 3 fights. His last 2 fights, Johnny Walker lost by knockout. So it feels like there's that potential for chaotic violence, and at the end of that, Zhang Mingyang very well could be the winner, the last one standing from that. Johnny Walker definitely could too, but unlike Anthony Smith, Johnny Walker's a little bit younger. He feels like he's got more miles left in the tank. Anthony Smith kind of felt like you're catching him right at the tail end of his career. So it feels like this is a step up. This is a bump up in competition for Zhang Mingyang, but not too much. So I do really, really like that. So for Zhang, this is a platform for him to expand his popularity, to slowly climb up those UFC rankings. And for Walker, this is a good fight for him too, because if you're looking at it outside of like the potential Chinese hometown advantage, for him, like you look at the guys that he's been fighting recently. He's been fighting Magomed Ankalaev a couple times. Just came out of a fight with Volkan Oezdemir. He's been fighting the ranked fighters of the UFC light heavyweights for a long time, like Anthony Smith. He's also been in a lot of main events. So for Johnny Walker, this is actually a little bit of a step backwards from the kind of caliber of fighters he's been fighting recently. So not an unwinnable fight for him either. I really like the fight overall. I think it's going to be entertaining for the Chinese fans. I think it's a high likelihood of something wild happening in the fight, so it's great. I also love the Aljamain Sterling versus Brian Ortega fight. I feel like featherweight is really interesting right now. There's fights that I feel like the UFC should be making. Movsar Evloev versus Alexander Volkanovski, Diego Lopez versus Yair Rodriguez, we know is not going to happen because Lopez is fighting John Silva at UFC Noche. So that's a good fight, but also kind of a shame that we're not getting Movsar. I don't know why the UFC is matching up Aaron Pico against Movsar Evloev for 5 rounds. I could be wrong once the fight plays out, but I don't know why they're feeding Aaron Pico to essentially the number 1 contender right away. This seems really strange unless they really don't like Evloev's style and they're hoping to kind of switch out Aaron Pico and hope that this guy who's maybe has a little bit more of an exciting style can switch out. I don't know if any of that kind of agenda is behind that matchmaking. But if you look at featherweight, it's pretty booked up right now. It leaves Lerone Murphy and it leaves Movsar Evloev. So I doubt the two are going to fight each other unless Alexander Volkanovski is sitting out somehow. You could see the two fighting for a number 1 contender fight. And I only bring this up just because now it seems like a lot of the slots at featherweight are getting filled up and we're going to see kind of the future of the division take shape in front of our eyes. The only other thing I want to bring up about the announcement was Shi Ming is going to be fighting Bruno Bazil, not at the Shanghai event, but at the, or I should say not at the UFC Fight Night event, but at Road UFC the day earlier. Now, as I looked at a lot of media members reacting to this news, I saw a lot of negativity, and I actually really, really like this decision. I love it because from the UFC's perspective, they're trying to build up Road to UFC. They're getting it in front of a live crowd in a pretty big space as well. They're putting it in front of a live crowd, and the reality is that you're not going to sell a ton of tickets beyond hardcore fans in the Shanghai indoor stadium. If you're just doing the Road to UFC semis, you're not going to sell a ton of tickets with that, maybe a couple thousand if at best. So you put someone with a popularity like Shi Ming in there, adds a little bit to the event, and I feel like it sets like a real, it makes it feel less just like a list of semifinal bouts, and it makes that event actually feel more like an event in and of itself. And I don't think that this is going to short Shi Ming out of too much popularity. Obviously, it's going to be a bigger crowd the next day. So that's a little bit of a drawback, but hopefully a lot of fans will show up for her and show out and go to the Road to UFC semifinals. So that's really why I like that fight in that spot. I don't honestly, at the end of the day, I'm just glad Road UFC is getting a little bit more love, and happy that it's in front of a live crowd. I believe tickets are on sale July 10th. Believe I saw the prices start off at some pretty reasonable levels. So if you're in China, if you're a fan of Chinese MMA, check that out. Drop your comments on the event below and stay locked in for more news on UFC Shanghai and Road UFC.